Today's episode of the podcast marks the start of a special three-part series looking ahead to the Unit 5 Diploma exam. This unit focuses on sparkling wines and involves both a practical and theory part. Across the 3 episodes, Christine Marsiglio, WSET Level 1 and 2 Program Manager and Wine Educator, will assess a sparkling wine against the WSET Level 4 Standardised approach to tasting. This will allow you to source the wine that is being tasted, locate the Level 4 Standardised approach to tasting, whether online or in paper form, and to follow along with the podcast. I've left below links to the wines that are being tasted and also where to locate the Level 4 SAT. Across the 3 episodes, Christine will assess first a Prosecco, then a Cava, and finally a Champagne. And just to note that I've edited each episode very lightly so that you get an idea of how long Christine was tasting each wine. And today's episode also features Christine's origin story and a Unit 5 sparkling overview. Enjoy!
Hi, my name is Christine Marsiglio, and I'm a wine educator here at WSET School London, and I'm also a program manager here at the school for levels 1 and 2. And originally I'm from Canada, as you might be able to tell by my accent, but I've been living here in the UK for 8 years, and before that I was studying in France for 2 years, where I got my Master's in Science in Enology and Viticulture. And I then came to the UK and did my diploma here at WSET School London as well. And now I'm working towards my Masters of Wine qualification as well, working on my research project. So final stages, hopefully everything goes well. And by this time next year, hopefully I should be an MW. So that's a little bit about me. And I really enjoy teaching here at the school, and I'm teaching from levels 1 all the way through diploma, which is quite enjoyable. And today we're going to be talking about 3 different sparkling wines.
Today, as you say, we're going to be looking at 3 sparkling wines. I'm going to be editing these down into 3 separate sessions, one looking at Cava, one looking at Champagne, and one looking at Prosecco, which you're going to sort of take us through. I would just ask you to say a little bit about the depth of tasting and, just really like what is different at those different levels here. So we're looking at level 4 today. Talk us through perhaps what are the evolution of complexity really as you go from level 2 to level 3 to level 4.
The basic SAT, the systematic approach to tasting, is relatively similar in that everything has appearance, nose, and palate. So that's common throughout all the levels. However, what happens is that you're expected to describe things with a little bit more depth. And then as you move from level 2 to level 3, you start talking a little bit more about quality and how you would assess that. And then when you get to level 4, you really start to have to look into why you have chosen a specific quality of this wine, and you need to make an argument for that. So it's not just ticking a box or writing one word, it's actually writing a few sentences, or in some cases a short paragraph about why you believe this wine is a certain quality. And then also you have to identify the wines in level 4 at the diploma level. So you, in some cases, will need to tell where 3 wines are from, or perhaps which grape variety they're made of. In some cases, you'll just have to identify a wine on its own. So it really goes up kind of in difficulty, but also you're expected to know many different styles of wine when you move from level 2 and then to level 3 and then to level 4. And with level 2, you don't actually have a tasting exam, whereas level 3, you do have 3 wines that you have to taste blind, though you're not expected to know where those wines are from or what grape they're from. And then with a diploma level, you have to taste 12 wines blind for your final tasting exam in Unit 3, which can be somewhat difficult, but people tend to do fairly well. It's the theory part of the exam that tends to be more difficult. So Unit 5 sparkling is all about sparkling wines, obviously, and you're expected to know many different styles of sparkling wine, and there is a tasting exam involved with that too, with 3 different sparkling wines. And again, you have to make an argument for what your choice for quality is, and putting the wine in context as well. So today we're going to walk through how we would taste some different styles of wine, and also their methods of production and some interesting facts about the wine itself, but also the regions that they're from. Okay, so the first wine that we're going to talk about is a Prosecco. This particular one is called Colle del Principe from Valdobbiadene, Prosecco Superiore, DOCG. So it's a long name, and the pronunciation can be difficult, but that's indicating that it's from a specific region in Italy and the DOCG area instead of the DOC. So there are two different areas within Prosecco. One is very, very large, which is the DOC, which covers pretty much all of northeast Italy. However, this wine is from a much smaller region within the DOCG, and the rules are actually very different between those two wines. The DOC has allows for higher yields, which means that you might not get as much concentration in the wine, whereas the DOCG has much lower yields, and so you get more concentrated styles of wine when you get, and also prices tend to be a little bit higher because of that as well. So this is a DOCG, which can be found at M&S for £12. So that's a little bit of information about that particular wine. So the grape variety here in Prosecco is Glera. Some other grape varieties are allowed, such as Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio in small percentages. So this particular wine has 85% Glera, 15% Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, and Pinot Nero. So there are a few extra grape varieties in there. So we're going to start by going through the SAT first, and we're going to try and relate everything in this wine back to either the winemaking techniques or the natural factors, because that's actually what's really important at diploma level, not just through the tasting, but the actual theory behind the wine. So we'll start by looking at it. So it is clear, which is good. There's some bubbles, which is also good because it's a sparkling wine. And the color here is very pale. We don't have the option to put water white, but we could call this lemon green. So this is clear, pale lemon green when we're going through our diploma SAT. And that's so that color can also indicate to us that this wine is probably quite young. So as white wines age, they tend to turn a little bit kind of yellow and then eventually gold. But this one has very, very little color, so it's quite youthful. We can observe just from the color. And if we go and give it a little swirl, and I do always swirl sparkling wines when I'm assessing them, mainly because when you're trying to just enjoy a wine, you don't want to lose any of those bubbles. But when you are assessing a wine in an objective way, then it's good to kind of get as much aroma out of the glass as you can. And so we, even with level 4, we're still using ISO glasses to assess sparkling wine, so we're not using special flutes or anything like that. Okay, so let's give it a smell. So here it's clean, which is good, so no faults. And it's a medium intensity, so there's a little bit of aroma coming out here. So it's not pronounced, but medium. And the aromas that we're picking up are all primary. So here, when we're talking about primary, we're saying that all these aromas are coming from the actual grape variety. So there's no winemaking aromas involved here, such as there's no oak aromas of vanilla or toast. This wine hasn't gone through malolactic fermentation, so there's no dairy aromas. And in fact, most Prosecco is not going to undergo malolactic fermentation because they're trying to preserve the acidity that's there. And also, they don't want to mask the delicate aromatics that are found in this grape variety. So most people aren't going to put it through malolactic fermentation. So no winemaking aromas here. So the primary aromas that we're picking up are pear and maybe some pear drop. So pear drop is a term that I didn't really understand before I moved to the UK. It's actually quite specific to here. But it's almost like this pear candy aroma. And you can get that when you ferment wines at a really low temperature. So this wine has been fermented at a cool temperature. They don't specify exactly how cool, but we can tell from that kind of pear drop aroma that it should be quite a cool fermentation, probably around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. Again, because we have these aromatic notes, these delicate aromatic notes and these pear drop aromas, we can also probably assume that it's been fermented in a stainless steel or a neutral vessel of some sort. And when we check the technical sheet, it has been fermented in a stainless steel vat with selected yeasts. So that would be the base wine in this case. So they take the grapes, the Glera grapes from the DOCG area, hand harvested in this case, with gentle pressing to reduce the amount of phenolics that are in the wine. And then they're fermenting that base wine dry, putting it, and then getting it ready for secondary fermentation, which in the case of Prosecco will happen in tank rather than in bottle. So this is a tank method wine. And you can tell that again when we're smelling it, because all these primary fruit aromas such as pear and blossom and apple and maybe some peach and a little bit of elderflower, but there are no notes of dough or bread, which you would find with a bottle fermented sparkling wine. So this smells like a tank fermented wine, and that's good because it is. Okay, so no secondary notes. And again, because this is so aromatic and so primary, we wouldn't expect this to have tertiary aging aromas, because what's going to happen as this wine ages, those kind of delicate aromas are going to fade. So this is a style of wine that should be consumed in its youth, so right away. So once you purchase this, you should probably buy it right away, and drink it right away, and you can tell that by the nose. Okay, so we've got a medium intensity with pear, blossom, apple, bit of peach, pear drop, maybe some elderflower. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the palate. So the first thing that I normally do with every wine, especially white wines, is that I just dip the tip of my tongue into the glass, which looks really funny, but it is a really good way of figuring out how much residual sugar is in the wine. So just dip the tip of your tongue in, and you can pick up just a little bit of sweetness, so just a hint of sweetness, which can be actually very difficult to assess with sparkling wines because many of them have quite high levels of acidity, which will mask that sweetness. Here, there's about 10 grams of residual sugar, which if this was a still wine, you might notice more easily. But here, when we go to taste it, we won't notice it as much. So it's very important that when you are assessing sparkling wines that you do dip the tip of your tongue in there to assess for sugar. Now, because it's 10 grams per liter of residual sugar, that means that this is a brut style of Prosecco, though many styles of Prosecco tend to be extra dry or dry, which is actually extra dry is between 12 and 17 grams of residual sugar, and dry is even higher than that. So sometimes that can be a bit confusing for the consumer. Okay, so we've dipped our tongue in. Now it's time to assess the rest of the palate. So we would classify this as off dry on the palate. Okay, so it's really also key with sparkling wines that after you've spat the wine out, you should really hold your mouth open over your spittoon to see how much you're essentially salivating or drooling. And that's going to help you understand how much acidity is there. In this case, we have medium plus levels of acidity. So there is some freshness there. And Glera is quite good at retaining that acidity. So that's good because that balances the level of residual sugar. Tannin we don't have to worry about here because it's a white wine. And the alcohol here is medium minus. So here we're at 11%. And that's quite typical for most Prosecco, is that it's around 11 or 11.5%. With a medium minus body. So because of those delicate fruit flavors, that high level of acidity, and that medium minus level of alcohol, we have a medium minus body. And the flavor intensity matches the aroma intensity on the nose, so about a medium level of flavor intensity here, with the same aromas that we found on the nose. So pear drop, pear, some peach, and some blossom aromas as well. Again, no secondary or tertiary notes here. Again, that's back to the winemaking because this went through secondary fermentation in tank. And the finish here is also, it's a little bit longer than just medium. I would say medium plus. So those kind of elderflower and blossom notes linger on for a little bit longer. So that then takes us to our conclusion section of our SAT. So we have to decide, be objective about what the quality of this wine is. So there's an acronym that can be helpful. So there's BLIC, which involves it looking at balance, length, intensity, and complexity of the wine. So if we look at the balance here, the balance between sugar and acid is really important. So we don't want too much sugar because then it would be sweet or cloying, but too much acid and then it's going to be too tart. And here I think the balance between sugar and acid is really well done. So they've created a really well balanced wine. It's not a particularly intense wine. We said that it was medium in intensity, but that's okay. That's kind of typical for the grape variety here. The finish was medium plus, which is great, but this is all about primary fruit, so it's not very complex. However, we wouldn't go as far to say it was simple because we were able to name many different types of primary aromas. So here, when we're putting everything together and we're looking at, is this really well defined? Does this really say it's a Prosecco? If you smell this, you go, yeah, that's definitely a Prosecco. So there's good varietal definition here as well. And it shows a sense of place. So all of these things combine, and you can make an argument to say, you know what, yes, okay, it doesn't have the longest finish, it's not the most intense wine, but we do have a number of different primary fruit aromas that are very well defined, and it's showing some great varietal typicity. And that will allow us to make an argument for very good quality in this case. And we look at the assessment for readiness for drinking or potential for aging. Again, as we said at the beginning, these primary fruit aromas are going to fade with time. So that points us to the fact that this should really be consumed now and doesn't have any potential for aging.
So yeah, thank you. I mean, as we would expect, a very textbook journey there through the SAT at level 4. I think with each of these episodes and with each of these wines, really, I want to get a sense of, some of the theory and maybe some of the challenges around the theory, really, because obviously the SAT is one part of the exam, but then there's going to be a theory component here for Prosecco. So I wonder if you just say something about that.
The theory portion of the Unit 5 exam, and this is the same for all the smaller units, students will be given a number of, in many cases it's 3 different words or maybe short sentences, in which case they'll have to write a paragraph about. Now that could be a question about Prosecco. I don't set the exam, so I don't know how that would work, but they need to know quite a lot about all the different regions and in some cases particular producers that might be important for that specific area in order to write a theory note on that. So in Prosecco, what I would focus on for the theory is the main differences between, say, the DOC and the DOCG. Not only what is different in the vineyard and where those vineyards are, but different yields and where the different markets are. So, for example, the DOC, their main they produce half of all the sparkling wine in Italy, the Prosecco DOC, which is a huge amount of wine. And then even the markets between the DOC and the DOC are actually quite different. So with the DOC, most of the Prosecco there is exported to the UK and then the US and Germany. However, the DOCG, which tends to be the higher quality wine, the main markets there are Germany, Switzerland, and then the UK. So it's very, very different, even though they have similar names. So that's really important to think about. And also the smaller areas within the DOCG, such as Cartizze and Asolo. So looking through your textbook to ensure that you know what are the most important things about Prosecco, but also maybe some important producers and important cooperatives as well. This is not just for Prosecco, but the same goes for Champagne and Cava and many other areas that produce sparkling wine as well. It's also very important that the students know about the production methods of Prosecco and all the other sparkling wines. So as we've talked about with Prosecco, knowing that it is a tank method of production and that dosage is not something that happens, but rather they don't adjust the sugar after they've done the second fermentation. It's done beforehand. So little intricacies about the production like that are very important, and how that production method affects the style of wine is kind of key, not just for Prosecco, but through the whole diploma course, really.
Thank you so much to Christine for today's episode, Prosecco. As mentioned, episodes 264 and 265 will feature Cava and Champagne, respectively. Please see below for all of the recommended resources for preparing for the Unit 5 exam. Also, if you've not already subscribed to Interpreting Wine Podcast, then please do so wherever you're listening. That way you'll be automatically informed when future podcasts are released. And of course, do follow along with me on social media. I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.